For the ignition, we will need several things. 1. Clean fresh fuel. 2. The right amount of air-to-fuel ratio for the engine. 3. Compression. 4. A spark. 5. A fully charged 12 volts battery. 6. A functioning starter. 7. A clean fuel injector. 8. Clean fuel filters. 9. A functioning voltage regulator. 10. A functioning main AC to DC charging coil. 11. A working high-voltage ignition coil. The first issue that prevents ignition. Fuel. Fuel check is done in order to confirm that the fuel is okay. This is done since in spite of the obvious, the meter might show a wrong reading even with an empty tank. 2. The fuel might be contaminated or contains water. 3. The fuel might be too old and can no longer be used for ignition. This happens only after a motorcycle was stored for several months without any use. Air-to-fuel ratio. The air-to-fuel ratio is determined by two main factors. A. Injector fuel flow. B. Engine air and intake flow via the manifold. To regulate the operation of these components, the motorcycle is using the ECU, electronic control unit, to determine how much fuel to add and how much air to add in each combustion cycle. This results in a smooth engine operation. Therefore, if anything is in the way of this system, like a clogged air filter, clogged injector, manifold or intake valve, the engine will not start, and will crank forever. Compression. Compression is a critical state of oscillating pressure inside the engine that is present during the stage of operation. The pressure allows the piston to convert the explosion to a mechanical movement. Any air leaks or broken seals will cause the combustion power to escape the engine before the engine can use it. If the engine does not have the correct compression due to a leak or a worn-out piston rings, it will not start. 4. A spark. The spark is the component that ignites the fuel during the operation. The spark is dependent on four components. A. The ignition coil. B. The spark plug. C. The spark plug cable. D. The electric wiring ribbons on the motorcycle. Brown with blue stripe wire. If any of these components are bad, the spark will not ignite the fuel as intended. Therefore, without a spark, there is no ignition. 5. A full battery. Since the engine is using a starter for the first few cycles, if the battery is weak it won't be able to power the starter. The fact that the control screen still works is simply because it takes very little power to turn on, even if the battery is low. When buying a new, lead-acid battery, it must be charged first before you can use it. This is due to the acid being added only after you buy the battery. The reason it's done is to extend the shelf life of lead-acid batteries. Buying a gel battery, or a sealed lead-acid battery, will allow you to use the battery right out of the box. This goes also for a lithium-ion battery. 6. The starter. The starter, as you already learned, is the part that starts the operation of the ignition for the first few cycles. A bad starter will not make the typical starting sound, but will either be silent, or sound like turning detached from the engine. 7. The fuel injector is a pretty robust magnetic switch valve that turns on and off each combustion cycle, with a cone-shaped spray pattern nozzle tip, with a diameter of less than a human hair. For this reason it might be clogged very easily if a contaminant made its way through the fuel filter. Fuel filter. There are two fuel filters in KTM motorcycles. One is at the outside under the fuel tank, and one inside the gas tank, attached to the fuel pump. If a fuel pump is dead it will not make the buzz sound when the main motorcycle key is turned on. But if the pump works, and the filter is clogged, the pressure will be low, and fuel will not flow to the engine as it should. This issue will prevent good ignition. The voltage regulator. a small AC to DC power converting unit. It receives power from the main AC charging coils and supply the motorcycle with 14.5 volts. This is used charging and powering the main components. If this part goes bad, the battery will drain and ignition cannot happen. AC charging coils are simply a copper wires winding. Similar to AC phase motor, it acts similar to the alternator in a car and convert the engine rotation to electric power. The only difference is that it produces AC current. That is later converted to DC via the voltage regulator. The ignition coils, or high voltage coils, is a small coil similar to a taser that produce high voltage pulses for the spark plug in order to initiate the combustion. If this part is bad, you have no spark, and therefore no ignition. Thanks for watching. Mechanics DIY.